described a quiet, slightly nebbish man who loved animals and never lost his temper. Not that any of this meant that Anthony didn't charge John with a kitchen knife, but it certainly did seem like Anthony wasn't the type to do such a thing, and my gut was telling me that something was off. I ignored my gut and went into the case full speed ahead, the media following the case every step of the way. It turned out that John flunked a lie detector test, which pretty much sealed it for me. I was representing a guilty man, and I was going to give him the same treatment that I gave everyone else. I was going to go balls to the wall and give him all I got. What I actually ended up getting was a mistrial. The prosecutor introduced the polygraph evidence without warning. I immediately objected because the judge had previously ruled that the polygraph evidence couldn't come in, and that was that. The jury was sent home, and the prosecutors, tired of the media glare, decided not to try him again. The judge ruled that the jury was tainted by the surprise admission of the polygraph test and the fact that John flunked it, so there was no way that they could make an unprejudiced decision. And that was that. Or so I thought. I tried walking to my car, but the throng of reporters were surrounding me, essentially blockading me from my black Beamer SUV. They were all asking me for a comment, but, of course, I wasn't going to give them anything juicy. "No comment," I finally said. "Now please back up and let me into my car before I call the police." I shoved a few reporters to the side, pushing one so hard that she fell on the ground. I just rolled my eyes, not bothering to help her up. She was the enemy, or she was part of the enemy squadron, and I couldn't care less about whether or not she tore her pantyhose and skinned her knee on the pavement. I finally was able to put my car in drive and drive off. When I arrived at my office, I finally was able to process the news that my client was in jail again for a brutal murder. Well, he was no longer my client, because my contract with him only lasted for the length of his murder trial, with the option that I could write the appeal if it came to that, which it didn't. But he was my client, and, because of me, he was free to do what he did to that poor Gina Caldwell. I felt sick, so I opened my purse and brought out some Tums. I drank a glass of orange juice and sat back in my chair. "This isn't your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. If you didn't take this case, somebody else would have, and he still would have been free." I shook my head. It didn't really work that way. Alternative universes with alternative endings didn't really go in a linear line. If I didn't take the case, it was possible that John would have never walked free, because perhaps, with his alternate attorney, the whole accidental polygraph courtroom admission wouldn't have occurred. Maybe a different attorney would have pled him out to 25 to life, and Gina never would have met the guy. Who knows what would have happened if I didn't get involved? As I sat looking out the window of my office at the expanse of the country club plaza below, my mind kept going there, to my guilt in getting off this John, which enabled him to do it again. Deep down, I knew that this day of reckoning was coming one day. I always knew it, from the moment I was a baby lawyer and working at the public defender's office. I always knew that I would do my job so well that I would one day unleash a monster back on the streets, and that I would end up with blood on my hands. I had been practicing for 10 years, and, thus far, it hadn't happened. Now it did, and I felt haunted, sickened, like I couldn't get the picture of Gina, so young and beautiful and full of life, out of my head. Gina had 2 girls who were only 11, and they would be without their mother for the rest of their lives. They would grow up knowing that their mother died in the worst, cruelest way possible, outside of being burned alive. Gina worked at the animal shelter as a volunteer, and she had rescue animals at her home. She had devastated friends and a whole life ahead of her. A life that was cut short because I chose to give John the best defense I could give, even though I knew, deep in my heart, that he was guilty as hell. "Hey," Tammy, my law partner, said as she peeked her head through my door. "I saw you on the news."